Well, we'd like to welcome everyone to the first episode of this season's The Next Step. Today we do have a very special guest, and you'll find out why momentarily. Today's program is being recorded, and if you do have questions throughout, please go ahead and submit those through the Q&A. But I think we should jump right into this. As a refresher, the Next Step is an Office of Academic Enhancement program that highlights the journeys of recent alumni. Our guests will reflect on their time at UM and how they've navigated life after graduation, and what their current path looks like. The Next Step is part one-on-one interview and part Q&A with students who are able to attend. Kicking off season 3, The Next Step is our very own Jordan Kraft. Jordan, nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, usually there's an element to this program where I'm reconnecting with somebody I haven't seen in a long time, but that's not exactly the case today, is it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's been too long.
So for those of you who don't know Jordan, Jordan's a Hammond Scholar who graduated in 2019. He got a Bachelor of Business Administration in Marketing and Management. And after some experience in the world of wealth management, he found his way back to the University of Miami to do the work he benefited from as an undergraduate. And Jordan, welcome. It's good to have you. I think we'll cover the arc of where you've been and where you are now as we talk. But why don't we start at the best place to start, back at the beginning. So tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up, and how you found yourself at the University of Miami.
Yeah, of course. So originally, I'm from a small town in upstate New York called Mechanicville. It's 1 square mile, 5,000 people, real spot on the map. I graduated in a high school of about 70 students. And I just never really was a big fan of the limitations of small town living. I did enjoy, similar to the college experience, you couldn't really leave without seeing someone you knew, which was nice. But I always kind of wanted more diversity, more opportunities. And that's how I kind of started looking at colleges. And as far as UM goes, it was definitely somewhere that seemed kind of far-fetched. It's quite as far away as home as I could get. And I ultimately just took a shot in the dark. I had a college advisor, or a high school advisor rather, just tell me, you have a free application, you might as well send it that way. And once I sent it away, kind of forgot about it, let it live, and then found out about the opportunity of the Hammond Scholarship, came down to visit the campus, fell in love, and kind of just made it my home from there.
If I remember correctly, so you mentioned you're a Hammond Scholar. So I was fortunate enough to interview you when you were a prospective college student. I conducted your interview for the Hammond Scholarship, and I vaguely remember you telling me where your affinity for the University of Miami came from. Can you recap that for me?
Yeah, so growing up, I lived with my grandmother and also my uncles, along with my mom as well. And I spent a lot of time playing video games with my uncles, and a lot of my family were Duke fans. So we had the NCAA basketball games. My uncles always, of course, got to be Duke. And I always just found myself playing as Miami. I was always a fan of the little commentary in the games regarding Miami. And so that's kind of what drew my interest to the school. Whether it was at the forefront or in the background of my mind, I'm not too sure, but ultimately I still have back home, back in my closet, I have the disc for NCAA 07 sitting in my closet because that's what really ended up getting me to this school.
That's awesome. Very funny. It's, sometimes these trivial things, and sometimes it's like, major things that lead to an interest. But yeah, I remember that, and I thought that was pretty cool to hear. All right, so tell us about sort of your early days at the university. You came in, you ended up getting a Bachelor of Business Administration. Did you always want to study business, or did that evolve over time?
So I always had an interest in business. I originally came to school. My original plan out of high school was to study music production. But then as I kind of learned more about that, I kind of found that was more of just like a hobby, something I was interested in, not really what I wanted to do full time. And while I was finishing up high school, I had a substitute teacher who had studied music business, and I didn't really ever know that was an option. So I talked to them a bit about what that meant and realized that was kind of what I was looking for. So I came to the university with the intention of studying music business. Then I found out that that meant having to learn theory more in depth and having to play in ensembles more in depth, and that wasn't really the way I wanted to go. And so then after some consideration, I took my first semester to be undeclared um, for arts and sciences, and then switched into the business school after talking with some advisors, figuring out I was like, well, I'm more focused on the business anyway. So I ended up making music business and entertainment industries my minor and focusing more on the business management and marketing aspect of it.
Take a moment to talk a little bit about your history with music. I mean, for you and I, as advisor and advisee, that was always something we had in common and talk about. And I always appreciated you sharing, what was new and fresh out there for me to be listening to. But you're also a player. So talk a little bit about what you play and how you learn.
Yeah, so music wasn't always a huge part of my life. It started kind of in that later elementary, early middle school time. Um, I originally wanted to play saxophone. I was super obsessed with the saxophone for a little while, but my school didn't have a saxophone that I could rent, and we were not about to pay $4,000 for an instrument I had never heard of. So I ended up picking up the trumpet, and that was what I played throughout middle school. And then when I got to high school, we realized that we had way too many trumpet players in my like late middle school band. So it was around late seventh grade, I believe. And my band director wanted us to switch to French horn. I didn't like the French horn, and I was like, we don't have a tuba in the band. It was like, why don't we? And so then I just picked that up and spent some time with my high school band teacher after class, after school, on weekends, kind of learning that instrument. And from there, I kind of fell in love with that. I took that instrument with me through high school. And then while I was applying to Miami, I was, I done a lot of watching YouTube videos of Ohio State's marching band and Southern University's human jukebox. And so I just sent an email to the band director here, and I was like, what do I need to do to be in the band? He was just like, show up to band camp. And so I came down early, jumped in the band, and fell in love with it even more. So I was able to continue playing throughout college as well.
So that's a perfect segue because I wanted to ask you about that involvement, but also other involvement. So talk a little bit about what it was like to be in the band, what that did for you, how it maybe helped with your transition to college, and then kind of segue into the other things you were involved in on campus.
So being in the marching band definitely helped my transition a lot. There's an immediate camaraderie with band students, so it kind of helped foster relationships. And even during band camp, we stayed in the what used to be the Hilton across the street from the university, and I had a roommate in that hotel room who is my current roommate here in Miami. So those relationships definitely fostered early, and being in the band was great. It helped me experience a lot of new people, learn a lot about myself as well. And it also led to a lot of the involvements that I was lucky to be a part of in my time. Firstly, being my fraternity that I joined freshman year, which is Phi Mu Alpha, which is a men's music fraternity, really gave me a lot of ways to continue pursuing music in various ways outside of the band, performing with friends, things like that. And additionally, with the band, I joined Psi Beta Sigma, which is a band service sorority, which really focuses on giving back to the community and the advancement of bands in America, which are two really important things for me as well. And then outside of the band experience. I was also heavily involved in United Black Students. Me and one of my closest friends were co-chairs for the alma mater competition for a couple of years for homecoming, which is an event that I really enjoyed. And also involved with Bond, Brothers Overcoming Negativity and Diversity, or not Diversity, Destruction. And those two organizations really helped me develop a lot in college because growing up, I didn't have a lot of people that, related to my experience in the world. Like I said, small town, 5,000 people, not a whole lot going on. But being able to kind of build that community and help create a sense of identity on campus was very largely important for me.
And how did those involvements evolve in your 4 years? A lot of what we'll advise new students to do is kind of explore everything in their first year, figure out what they want to try out, start investing in that stuff by your second year and maybe your third year. And usually what you tend to see is students start to detach from some things on campus, I think, in an effort to start looking forward. So how did your involvements evolve over your 4 years?
Yeah, so for me, I definitely started out just, joined and kind of was a member of each of those organizations. And that kind of gave me time to realize like where was my heart? Where was I going out of my own volition as opposed to, requirements? And that helped me kind of advance onto the e-board of my fraternity because that was something that I held very close. And also take on leadership roles my junior year with UBS. But it also allowed me to take a step back. And with my service sorority, I kind of made it a point that I only wanted to be a member. That was something that I just wanted to participate in. And similarly with Bond, that was my role. I wasn't trying to be the head of another organization and have a lot of things to plan. I just wanted to kind of experience an organization as a member. And I think both of those played off really well for me. And I think being able to both lead and follow were helpful. And as far as they've evolved even past graduation, I still am able to meet up with people from those organizations after the fact. I still have a group chat of friends that I met through UBS, and I still have friends in the area from my fraternity and from the band. And so they've really just expanded past we were in these orgs in undergrad to we're friends and we have connected along the way.
So let's look in a different direction, more about how your career goals may have evolved in your time at UM. And so the interesting thing I think I like to really tease out of this conversation is what I would assume is very much a fact that there's no chance when you enrolled as a first year college student, you said to yourself, I aspire to one day be a scholarship advisor. And yet here you are, right? So what I wish a lot of undergraduates knew and recognized or could appreciate from their current vantage point is how twisting and winding the road may be to discovering opportunities. So let's kind of start back at the beginning. What were some of your career goals when you enrolled at the University of Miami?
So right away when I, started applying for colleges, my game plan, I wanted to work for a major record label, whether it's A&R, touring, label management, something along those lines. That was basically all I was interested in. There was no other option. And as I spent time kind of working, I had an unpaid internship with a record label, which was really interesting, but also a little hectic, a little not quite satisfying. And that kind of made me open my mind as far as what other options are there. And as I spent more time in the business school, I then kind of was understanding more of the general understanding of marketing and management. And from there, I was really interested in marketing as a whole. Um, and then I spent some time, I didn't touch on this before, but I worked at the Topple Career Center for all 4 years of my undergrad. So I spent some time talking with recruiters from different marketing firms. And I was like, this also isn't quite scratching my itch as far as what I'm looking to do. And so that was really just me, probably mid to end of senior year, kind of like I don't quite know really where to go with this because every time I kind of delve deeper, it's a little more muddy. And so that kind of led me to my first job, um, which I actually was reached out to by the recruiter from the company, which was a really interesting experience for me. And that was a job in financial relations. And I wasn't really big on finance, but I knew when I took finance, my academic advisor tried to get me to take a minor because they saw kind of a natural tendency towards finance, but I was never super interested in it. And from there, I did the interview process and found out I was like, you know, this might be it. This sounds like what I'm looking for. And so I decided to take the leap. I accepted the offer, moved up to Tampa, and that was kind of my lock in after graduation. So from March on, I was like, that's what I'm doing. Spent some time getting some certifications and taking some tests to sell insurance and financial plan for individuals. And then as time went on, I realized that doing commission based work wasn't doing it for me. It didn't feel like we were doing a lot as far as for me personally, it wasn't, meaningful work. And so I decided to take a step back from that and really reevaluate my career options. And that's when I found myself back on campus at the career fair. I came back because I was like, there's a career expo. It's like, it's not that far for me to go from Tampa to Miami. Why not? So I came looking for, again, those business opportunities, those music opportunities, just general things that made sense for me, a lot of entertainment industry things, and ended up talking with Eddie Cruz, who was working for Topple at the time. And he had told me that they had an opening for an internship coordinator. And I had known that position because I kind of watched it grow and become. And so he said he recommended that I, take a look at the description, see if it was something interesting. And at that point, I wasn't super interested, but I said, what do I have to lose? Let's give it a shot. So I took a shot in the dark again, as many of these shots have been. And I ended up getting that job. And over the time that I spent working there, that's when I realized the passion I had for higher education. And I think that stemmed from my passion for building community, my passion for giving back. I think all of those kind of underlying factors are what came to light then. And that's what led me here. I think it's not remiss that I had a full circle with Topple that led to a full circle with the OAE. And I think being able to be a face that I didn't see a lot of on campus, which is just Black men in higher education in general. I think that was very important to me, and I didn't know that until I became that face. And I was just yesterday speaking with a colleague, Brian Malcolm, we overlapped very shortly. But I think just that interaction of seeing like it can be done really did help activate something within me as far as my passion for higher education.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's a recurring theme in my conversations with students as they try to find their way, which is to sort of, you know, it's really important to keep your eyes open and your mind open to the things that may pop up that you hadn't anticipated or hadn't sought out. And I think some of our students, especially being just very high achieving students, they have a goal in mind and they like the idea of sort of mapping out the path that they'll take to accomplish that goal. And sometimes when it doesn't work out quite that clearly, it can kind of throw you off. You're not quite sure. And that's an uncomfortable place to be, but also it's important to remember that, these things tend to work themselves out, especially if you're working hard and paying attention and keeping your eyes open. So I love hearing you tell those stories. And so many things that you said reminded me of my own um, evolution, which I think the first thing was when you said you came into undergrad, you wanted to work in the music business. And that mirrors exactly how I felt about sports when I came to graduate school at UM. The goal was to work in professional sports, doing something like marketing or everyone would love to be on like the operations side, figuring out trades and stuff like that. But um, about halfway through my 2-year program, I was really questioning that. And I had also gotten a graduate assistantship in the Dean of Students office here at UM. And that experience really helped me see what I had already known, which was college is an extremely transformative time in our lives. And it meant so much to me, those transformations. And I was really attracted to being part of that experience for other people. So that was my draw to higher ed. But here I was getting a degree in sport administration at the time. And I didn't know maybe how those two things could connect. And one of my professors told me about academic support for student athletes, which I had no idea existed. And so I kind of went all in on the internship here at the university. And very fortunately, that worked out and turned into the start of my career. But again, it's one of those things, I made decisions, the best decisions I could at each juncture, but didn't necessarily know what the end game was until it was right in front of my face. And I was like, this is the path I want to take. And then of course I segued to this role, which again was not an intentional pivot, but the opportunity came up and I was like, I've always heard about these Hammond Scholars. And I actually worked with a few that played football when I was in athletics. And I was fond of the student group and I was fond of the folks who worked in the office. And I thought, maybe it's a good time to try something else. So I kind of took a leap there. But I think it's an important thing for everyone to sort of remember and recognize is you don't necessarily know where opportunities will come from.
Definitely.
So you really touched on kind of all my follow-up questions for that process. You kind of wove the tale, which was awesome. What do you think about the future from where you sit right now? I mean, I know you just began this position. You've got a lot to experience and learn and grow from and contribute. But how do you sort of, or do you, how far ahead do you think into the future?
I tend to look 2 to 3-ish years. I feel like 5 is a little scary. I don't want to think about being 30 yet. So I tend to look 2 or 3 years. And I focused that when I was transitioning here. In the next 2 to 3 years, I definitely plan to get my master's. Because I think that's originally that wasn't something I was going to. Once I graduated, I was like, I am absolutely done with college. There's no reason to do it again. But as my career interests changed and the opportunities around me changed, I was like, I should have a master's and eventually maybe a doctorate, which is interesting. It's something that's something when I originally was like, I don't want to do it again. It was definitely contradictory in general because I do love learning. I want to still learn. But it was just at that time, no way was I doing school again. So I would love to work my way into grad school as well, and kind of do that in tandem with growing in this position, and to be, even further down the line, something like a dean of students or an assistant dean on a campus, something that I have recently realized would be really beneficial and rewarding for me.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. Let me let you in on a little secret. 30's not so bad. Your 30's in general are pretty amazing. 40, it's a little early for me to have a strong conviction, but I don't know. Something happens. Something happens around 40. Yeah.
It's good to know. It's good to know.
Let's do a couple quick hits, get to know you a little bit better, chat about some fun stuff. What's your favorite movie?
I've tried many times to see if this answer changes, but every time I watch this movie, it's back to the same. My favorite movie is Perks of Being a Wallflower. That was one of my favorite books growing up. It's a really impactful movie. Anytime I'm in a rut or feeling a type of way, I know I can throw that movie on and really just feel emotions.
Okay. And for you, I think this sort of line of questioning would be missing something if we didn't ask about your favorite album of all time.
And that's where it gets tough. I feel like I've definitely, this answer is ebbed and flowed over time. Um, but as far as an album that I listen to kind of all the time, front to back, um, I'd probably say Kendrick Lamar's "To Pimp a Butterfly" kind of hits every spot of my brain that I need it to.
Nice. Favorite cuisine?
As far as cuisine, I feel like American Soul is honestly my favorite. It's either that or Indian, which is two really different spectrums. Um, but I feel like if I'm being cooked for, then Indian food. But if I'm cooking, then kind of that soul food, feel good food.
Well, I was just gonna suggest we go out for Indian food one of these days, but now you said you expect to be cooked for. I'm not sure I can pull that off. What's there? Actually, we didn't talk about your study abroad experience. I was gonna ask you about your favorite trip you've taken. So maybe there's two different answers there, or maybe we could talk about both.
Yeah, so my favorite trip I've taken kind of coincides with my study abroad experience. So I spent the spring semester of my junior year at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. And that was an extremely impactful experience. It was the first time I had been out of the country because I don't count Canada because I was next door neighbors with Canada growing up and I only went once, so it wasn't quite the same. But yeah, I spent the semester there, living on the dorms, just kind of really immersing myself in that college experience. And while I was there, I took a trip to Brisbane and Sydney. And the week that I spent in Brisbane was amazing. I went with a friend from the dorms and we got an Airbnb room with a local that was kind of helpful as far as tour guiding and things like that. So she was wonderful. We caught a couple episodes of Jeopardy with her at night, type of deal. Um, but yeah, just hopping on the bus, throwing the coins around like they were real money there, and just being able to see kind of the similarities between Australian and American experiences, but also the differences because there's a lot of British influence, obviously. And there were also a ton of people that I met that were also studying abroad. So I believe my floor was about 30 students, and I think 10 or 15 of us were all there on study abroad. So there are people from across the world, kind of all living under the same roof. We spent time once a week. Everyone would get together in the kitchen. We had different shifts for who was cooking the Sunday meals. So that was really exciting. And just kind of experiencing the differences in college culture, because obviously their schools don't have sports teams, which is a very different aspect. And just sports in general were a little different there. But I will say rugby games were something else. They were real intense. I would love to go see a sevens match again.
Did you join the rugby club when you came back?
I thought about it. I
Did you?
almost joined it while I was there. And then I was like, this is a lot all at once. Let me relax.
It's
Uh,
intense.
yeah, it was a lot. I did play a few games though.
Okay. Do you keep in touch with anybody that you met on that experience?
A lot of people.
Really?
I the year after, or within the year after coming back, I took a trip to New York City to meet up with someone that I had met, the girl that I went to the Brisbane trip with. We met up with her in New York City. One of the girls from Australia, our RA, came, and another kid that I met from DC came, and the four of us just hung out in New York City for a few days. And I believe that was right after graduation. I did that and met up with them. So that was a blast. And still keep in touch with a bunch of people. I was supposed to see a few people in the UK, but that trip got canceled. But we're still in touch. But yeah, it kind of expanded my network of friends and places to go once I left Australia.
Cool. Just to wrap things up, we'll get a little more heavy with the last few questions. But what would you say you're most proud of so far?
So far, honestly, being able just every so often I'll look around, realizing that I'm in Miami for real. And I'm just proud that I was able to pack up jump across the country with no real roots anywhere and really plant roots in the city. I've been here for just over 6 years now, and it's it's home now. And I think that's something that growing up, nobody really leaves the town. You grow there. You replace the 5,000 people every so often. It's a constant flow of people. And that was just something that I saw one family member, kind of pack up, move off, and I was like, I would like to do that. And so the fact that that's happened, and that every so often I get hit with that realization that I live here. This is something I've done kind of on my own, with of course a large support network. But yeah, just being able to have moved to Miami successfully, with a couple bumps here and there, but successfully moving is definitely what I'm most proud of.
And is there anything that you would do differently if you had the chance?
As far as my undergraduate career goes, I think the only thing I would do differently, I might have done the band my sophomore year. I did take a year off of the band, but then when I returned, I was kind of like, why did I take that year off? But I did enjoy that year off. That was our 10-win season. We were number two in the country. It was great. So that was a plus. But also, um, my involvement on campus, I wish I would have gotten a little more involved those first 2 years, because I think sophomore year, I kind of let things go a little bit. And then that junior, senior year, I was kind of trying to play catch up with, wait, but I want to do this, and wait, I want to do that. So I think just I did manage to do quite a lot on campus in my time, but I think there were some things that I wish I had the opportunity to kind of get my hand in that pool as well.
And finally, you mentioned coming full circle on a couple of fronts, but now you are the senior program coordinator in the Office of Academic Enhancement. You work very closely with our current undergraduate Hammond Scholars. For you yourself, having been a Hammond Scholar and now working with that student population, what does it mean to you to be a Hammond?
Being a Hammond was instrumental in my college experience. As I mentioned, just like being in the band, it kind of forced me to have a group of friends, which I appreciated. I'm still in contact with a bunch of students that I met through the Hammond program. And being a Hammond, just that's the only reason that I was able to come to the university. And I think that's the case for a lot of students. Is if you ask them why they chose the University of Miami, a lot of times the answer is the Hammond Scholarship. And I really enjoyed the emphasis freshman year that was put on community service, because as I previously mentioned, that's something that I'm really passionate about. So it was nice that the requirements and my own, interests kind of overlapped in that sense. And just being able to have this separate support network of advisors, that are genuinely just interested in what you're doing and how you're doing, as opposed to worried about getting you out of here with the perfect GPA so that your numbers count right, and really just caring about your story and your interests and things like that. Because a lot of times with academic advisors or department heads, they're over such a large group of students that you can't get that personal with every student. And that's where I found that the OAE was really different. Was there weren't it wasn't a massive amount of students on campus that were serviced by the OAE, and so having the individual time to meet one on one, to talk about just what concert did you see this week, and how did those tests go. I think those types of meetings are super impactful in a way that doesn't always showcase. It's like it does what it needs to and sits in the back of your brain for a while. But when you take time to reflect on those things, that's when you realize, like, oh, that was really helpful 6 weeks ago. I don't know why I didn't realize that. So I think those things really created that impact that the Hammond Scholarship had on me. And I think a lot of people would share that sentiment.
Well, Jordan, listen, it's a lot of fun chatting with you about this stuff. We've been fortunate to have some of these conversations over the last few weeks, which have been your first few weeks in this role. I was very proud and pretty excited to be able to offer you the position to work here, and I'm proud to call you my colleague. I was proud to be your advisor, and I'm excited that your this next chapter of your professional life is here with the OAE, and I appreciate you sharing all these, twists and turns. I think it's really illuminating and important for our students to hear. So Jordan, thank you. A lot of fun chatting.
Of course, Chris. Thank you for having me. Yeah, those twists and turns, something that nobody really wants to address, nobody wants to happen, but they're going to happen anyway.
Listen, I think there's only one fitting way to wrap up this conversation. What do you think?
I think I know where you're going with that.
Let's do it.
All right.
It's all about the you, Jordan.
Always.